Asylum on the Hill, Athens, Ohio. Poltergeist Spectral Portal opens. Chapter 1. The awakening rain lashed against the granite facade of the former Athens Lunatic Asylum. Towering trees, remnants of what was once a therapeutic garden, bent under the weight of the storm. The eerie silhouette of the Gothic structure, which had once stood as an emblem of torment and isolation, now wore a new guise: the Athens Art Museum. Beneath a grand archway bearing the emblem of the institution, guests streamed in, eager to witness the historic transformation. Inside, a modernized interior meshed perfectly with preserved Victorian architecture, forming a seamless bridge between past and present. Galleries exhibited contemporary art, yet some rooms retained remnants of the asylum, a nod to its dark past. Amid the mingling guests, Charlotte Hale, the museum's curator, adjusted her glasses, the gleaming excitement in her eyes visible. To think, this place once housed the mentally ill and now, it's an epitome of art and culture, she remarked to a tall, lean man beside her. Mark Thompson, a journalist for the Athens Daily, nodded, scribbling down notes. It's poetic in a way. From darkness to light. As they spoke, a portrait behind them drew attention. A melancholic figure of a woman, her gaze empty, yet profoundly haunting. A plaque underneath read, "Margaret Shilling, patient, 1873. She was the last patient to pass away here, wasn't she?" Mark inquired, his brow furrowing. Charlotte sighed. Yes. Legend has it that she was playing a game of hide-and-seek with a nurse. They never found her. Months later, her body was discovered in the attic. The stain her body left behind can still be seen. Mark shivered. Why exhibit this here? It's a tribute, Charlotte replied softly. A reminder that this place, before being a sanctuary for art, was a sanctuary for souls. The evening's ceremony began with a local orchestra playing in the grand ballroom. Attendees sipped wine and admired art installations, each more captivating than the next. The atmosphere was electric, charged with wonder. Suddenly, a shrill scream punctured the air, followed by a power outage. Darkness devoured the room, save for the sporadic flash of lightning outside. Gasps and murmurs replaced the previously jubilant chatter. A few minutes that felt like eternity passed before the emergency lights flickered to life, casting an eerie, dim glow throughout. Charlotte, pale-faced, grabbed a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are working to restore power." But as the guests' eyes adjusted, a more troubling realization dawned. Several visitors were missing. The young couple by the contemporary art wing, the elderly gentleman admiring Margaret's portrait, and a teenage girl documenting her visit on social media, vanished without a trace. Panic surged. Families clung to each other. Mark approached Charlotte, his voice hoarse. "What's happening?" Charlotte shook her head, dazed. "I don't know. But we need to ensure everyone's safety." The local police arrived swiftly, barricading the museum and beginning a thorough search. Hours turned into an agonizing overnight vigil. And as dawn painted the horizon, a grim fact was clear: the missing guests were nowhere to be found. The news spread like wildfire. The glorious opening of the Athens Art Museum was overshadowed by an insidious mystery. Margaret Shilling's story once again became the talk of the town, with rumors suggesting her restless spirit might be seeking revenge. The museum was closed indefinitely, its grandeur now tainted with terror. And as the doors shuttered, whispers floated through Athens, a haunting echo from its disturbing past, leaving residents wondering if some places, no matter how transformed, never truly let go of their dark histories. Chapter 2. The dark past. A dense fog rolled in, consuming the imposing structure of the Athens Lunatic Asylum. Shadows of the towering trees stood tall and stark against the cold, silver light of the moon. The year was 1903. Inside, the distant cries and whimpers of patients echoed through the sterile corridors. Back then, the line between the institution's duty of care and outright cruelty was often blurred. The state-of-the-art treatments of the era were nothing short of controversial. Dr. Charles E. Wilson, a tall man with an imposing presence and sharp features, was the asylum's lead physician. He was known for his innovative approaches, earning both admiration and scrutiny from his peers. The advent of new treatments like hydrotherapy, where patients were submerged in water for hours, and the dreaded electroshock therapy were introduced under his watchful eyes. While many believed these treatments to be forward-thinking, whispers spoke of patients getting worse, not better. Amid the sprawling grounds of the asylum, an isolation wing housed those deemed too dangerous or lost to traditional methods. Inside, patients experienced a living nightmare. Strapped to beds, some wailed for release, while others were eerily silent, their eyes devoid of any spark. In the heart of this wing, Dr. Wilson's private office was a stark contrast. Rich mahogany furniture, walls lined with books, and a fireplace that crackled with warmth. It was here that he documented his experiments, confident of his place in medical history. One evening, as the night deepened, Dr. Wilson reviewed the patient files. His fingers brushed against one folder, thicker than the rest. The name read, Margaret Shilling. Margaret had become the subject of Dr. Wilson's fascination. Initial treatments had little effect on her, leading to more extreme measures. His notes detailed sessions where Margaret was left in a sensory deprivation tank, her pleas echoing long after the session ended. Yet, Margaret intrigued him not for her ailment but for her resilience. She seemed almost immune to his methods. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Standing at the doorway was Nurse Agatha, an older woman with graying hair, her face etched with lines of wisdom and sorrow. "Sir, it's about Margaret. She's having another episode." Sighing, Dr. Wilson followed her to Margaret's cell. Inside, Margaret was suspended midair, her body convulsing, the very air around her seeming to pulse with an unseen energy. As Dr. Wilson approached, her head snapped towards him, her eyes black voids. "Doctor," she hissed, her voice layered with multiple tones, some not human. "Your methods won't work on me." Stunned, Dr. Wilson took a step back. Nurse Agatha, clutching her rosary, whispered, "It's the devil's work." Refusing to be cowed, Dr. Wilson moved closer, speaking calmly, "Margaret, you are ill. We are trying to help you." But Margaret laughed, a sound that chilled the bone. "Oh, Charles," she crooned, using his first name in a taunting manner. "You think you have power here? You're merely a puppet. And soon, your strings will be cut." The threat was clear. Dr. Wilson, ever the rationalist, believed this to be another manifestation of her illness. But the events that followed would shake his convictions. Days turned into weeks. Patients began reporting visions of Margaret wandering the corridors at night, whispering promises of freedom in exchange for loyalty. Dr. Wilson himself experienced disturbances. Papers shuffled in his office, voices calling his name, and even visions of a shadowy figure standing by his bedside. The final straw came on a frosty winter's night. Dr. Wilson, working late, heard a commotion from the isolation wing. Rushing there, he found patients outside their cells, gathered in a circle, chanting in unison. At the center stood Margaret, her arms raised, drawing power from an unseen source. As Dr. Wilson tried to intervene, the very ground trembled. The walls of the asylum shook, and lights flickered erratically. Then, in a blinding flash of light, Margaret vanished, leaving behind only the chilling echo of her laughter. The aftermath was chaotic. Patients were quickly returned to their cells, and the incident was hushed up. But the damage was done. Dr. Wilson, once a beacon of scientific rigor, was now a broken man. Paranoid and tormented by visions, he became a recluse. 2 months later, his body was found in his office, an apparent suicide. But those who found him spoke of an unnatural cold that enveloped the room and a shadowy figure that seemed to lurk in the corners. The tragedy of Dr. Charles E. Wilson became another dark chapter in the asylum's history, whispered among staff but never spoken aloud. The line between science and the supernatural had been irrevocably blurred, leaving an indelible mark on the Athens Lunatic Asylum. And as the years rolled on, the asylum would witness more mysteries, more shadows of its dark past, forever trapped within its walls. Chapter 3: The Vanishing Graves. Rain slanted down in icy sheets, casting a shimmering veil over the town of Athens. Nestled at the edge of the town was a plot of land that appeared barren, save for the occasional tuft of hardy grass. It was said, however, that once in a blue moon, when the heavens aligned in a peculiar manner, the seemingly vacant land would give birth to Sim's Cemetery, a place neither fully of this world nor the next. The legend of Sim's Cemetery was deeply interwoven with that of its namesake, John Sims. A man of great wealth and even greater mystery, he arrived in Athens in the late 1800s, buying up vast tracts of land but keeping mostly to himself. Some claimed he was a businessman escaping his tumultuous past, while others whispered of darker dealings, of pacts with the underworld. Regardless of speculation, Sims left an indelible mark upon his passing. Not only through his amassed wealth and properties, but with the sudden appearance of a cemetery bearing his name, one that would vanish as suddenly as it came. For those fortunate or unfortunate enough to witness its materialization, Sim's Cemetery was a sight to behold, a perfectly preserved graveyard from the Victorian era, with ornate gravestones and a Gothic mausoleum at its heart. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly uncanny. However, Sim's Cemetery wasn't the only resting place that held dark allure. A few miles north lay Haining Cemetery. While it didn't boast the spectral vanishing act of Sims, it was home to tales of its own, tales of apparitions, cold spots, and a rumored witch who was said to walk its grounds. When local historian Clara Bennett caught wind of the impending appearance of Sim's Cemetery, she was determined to investigate both sites. She believed that solving the mystery of one could unlock the secrets of the other. Equipped with a camera, a notebook, and an old map pointing to the rumored locations of both cemeteries, Clara set out on a dreary afternoon. Her first stop, Sim's Cemetery. As she approached the plotted coordinates, she felt a palpable shift in the air. It grew colder, and the hairs on her arms stood on end. Before her eyes, the mist began to shape itself, and the cemetery materialized. Clara gasped, taking in the ethereal beauty of the scene. She felt like she had stepped into another era. With a sense of reverence, she wandered among the gravestones, reading the inscriptions of those who were laid to rest there. As she neared the mausoleum, she felt a strange compulsion. Drawn towards it, she approached its darkened entrance. Suddenly, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Whirling around, she came face to face with a translucent figure, John Sims himself. His visage, though ghostly, exuded a gentle sadness. "You seek answers," he intoned. Clara nodded, her heart racing. Who are you? Why does this cemetery appear and disappear? A sigh escaped Sim's ethereal lips. Bound by a curse, I am neither here nor there. This land was once a meeting point for those who dabbled in the dark arts. I, in my ignorance, sought their power and, in doing so, bound my spirit and this place to the ebb and flow of ethereal tides. Moved by his tale and sensing a deeper connection to Haining Cemetery, Clara asks, what of Haining? Is it bound by the same fate? Sims looked away, his gaze filled with regret. Haining was the resting place of the very witch who cursed me. She was a powerful force, both revered and feared. When she foresaw her end, she reached out to the other side, binding her spirit to the land and dooming those who sought her power. Clara's mind raced. If Sims was cursed by the witch of Haining, then solving the mystery of one could indeed unlock the other. With a newfound sense of purpose, Clara headed towards Haining Cemetery. The path was overgrown, with ancient trees forming a canopy that made the twilight seem even darker. When she finally reached the cemetery, she immediately felt an oppressive energy. Unlike Sims, this place felt malevolent. Drawn towards a particular gravestone, Clara felt the temperature drop. Before her lay the resting place of the rumored witch, her name lost to time. As Clara attempted to decipher the weathered inscriptions, she was interrupted by an eerie voice. Why do you seek me? Startled, Clara looked up to find a ghostly apparition, her form draped in tattered rags, her eyes black voids. The Witch of Haining. Clara swallowed her fear, replying, I seek answers. About Sims, about this place. A raspy laugh echoed. Sims was a fool, meddling in powers he couldn't comprehend. But you have no such excuse. Leave now, or join us in eternal unrest. Feeling an invisible force pushing her away, Clara, gathering her courage, responded, I will find a way to break the curse. To free both you and Sims. The witch's form wavered, a hint of sadness crossing her face. Many have tried. All have failed. As Clara made her way back to town, the weight of her mission settled upon her shoulders. She had touched the very edges of the supernatural, and she knew her journey was only beginning. With 2 cemeteries bound by a dark past, she was determined to uncover the truth and free the souls trapped in eternal torment. The mysteries of Sims and Haining cemeteries loomed large, promising more chills, more hauntings, and an epic quest to break an age-old curse. And Clara Bennett was right at the heart of it all. Chapter 4: The Pentagram Conspiracy. Wilson Hall, an imposing structure, stood in silent testimony to a history far darker than the academic pursuits it currently housed. With its tall windows and spires reaching toward the heavens, the structure had an eerie gravity. Clara Bennett had always felt it, even before she knew of its link to the mysticism that enshrouded Athens. A few days after her haunting encounters at Sims and Haining cemeteries, Clara sat in the town's small library, surrounded by dusty books and handwritten journals. She was in pursuit of a theory, one that connected Wilson Hall to the mysterious appearances and disappearances of local cemeteries. A large map of Athens lay spread out on the table in front of her. Marked on it were the various known cemeteries, including Sims and Haining. When she connected the dots, a chilling pattern emerged. Wilson Hall stood at the very center of a perfect pentagram. Heart racing, Clara reached for a journal dated from the 1800s. The journal belonged to an architect named Edward Granger. Within its pages, she found notes about Wilson Hall's construction. Granger wrote about being commissioned by an unnamed group with vast resources. This group seemed obsessed with the alignment of the building to specific geographic points. Clara's suspicion grew as she read his increasing discomfort with the project. Granger mentioned mysterious rituals at the construction site, figures in hooded cloaks, and eerie chants that seemed to resonate from the ground itself. As Clara delved deeper, she stumbled upon a faded photograph tucked within the journal pages. It depicted the hall's inauguration, and among the gathered crowd were 5 figures, each standing at a point corresponding to the pentagram's vertices. The realization sent shivers down her spine. This dark past was perhaps what attracted the supernatural to Wilson and Jefferson Halls. Especially Jefferson Hall, which had been the subject of countless ghost stories. Determined to uncover more, Clara decided to visit Jefferson Hall under the cover of night. The moon was just a thin crescent, casting dim light upon the campus. Clara's footsteps echoed softly as she approached Jefferson Hall. Once a residence for students, it had been shut down due to numerous unexplainable occurrences. Stories ranged from apparitions appearing in mirrors to inanimate objects moving on their own. Upon entering the hall, a cold draft greeted Clara. Armed with a flashlight, she began her exploration. The building's old age was evident: peeling paint, broken furniture, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Clara's flashlight beam landed on a door with the number 428. This room, as local legend stated, was the epicenter of the hauntings. With bated breath, Clara turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The room was shockingly well preserved. On a desk lay an open journal, next to which was an old photograph, the same one Clara had found in the library, but this one had annotations. As Clara focused on reading, a soft whisper broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Startled, Clara swung her flashlight around, its beam catching a fleeting figure, a student, dressed in clothing from a bygone era, his eyes hollow, filled with sorrow. "You seek answers," the apparition continued. "But some things are better left undiscovered." Clara, despite her fear, replied, "I need to know the connection." The pentagram, the cemeteries, Wilson Hall. Quote. "The spirit sighed, I was once a student here. Drawn into rituals, promises of power, knowledge beyond this realm." The group, those who commissioned Wilson Hall, they never left. "They are bound here, as am I." As the spirit recounted his tale, Clara listened with rapt attention. The group, known as the Keepers, had sought to harness the energies of the ley lines upon which the cemeteries stood. They believed that by placing Wilson Hall at the center, they could tap into an ancient power source. However, their meddling with forbidden forces had backfired. A ritual gone wrong had not only bound them to the hall but had also opened a portal to the other side. This portal lay at the heart of the supernatural occurrences throughout the campus. But why the hauntings? Why the cemeteries? Clara asks. The spirit looked pained. Each of us, the Keepers, were entombed in the cemeteries that form the pentagram. Our restless souls, combined with the disrupted energies, have caused the disturbances. The weight of the revelation hung heavily in the air. Clara knew she had a massive task ahead: to close the portal and lay the restless souls to rest. As she left Jefferson Hall, the spirit's words echoed in her ears: "Beware, the Keepers still guard their secret. They won't let it be undone easily." The next days would be a whirlwind of research, seeking ancient rituals, and bracing for a confrontation with the Keepers. The pentagram conspiracy was just the beginning, and Clara Bennett was once again at the forefront of a battle between the living and the dead. Chapter 5: Mysterious Phone Calls. The Ohio University Inn was a picturesque spot, Nestled on the edge of the campus, it overlooked the gentle hills and dense woods of Athens. To a visitor, the inn suggested serenity, a place to escape the frenzied pace of life. But those who knew its history could attest to a much different reality, one that was less inviting. Gabby Beeler, a journalism student at Ohio University, had recently taken a job as a receptionist at the inn. She was keen on making some extra cash and felt that the atmosphere there, with its old-world charm, might inspire her writing. But she would soon discover that there were stories hidden within its walls that she hadn't bargained for. 2 weeks into her job, Gabby began receiving mysterious phone calls. It always occurred at the same time, 11:13 p.m. The inn's landline would ring, its shrill tone echoing in the empty lobby. Gabby would answer with the standard greeting, "Good evening, Ohio University Inn." "This is Gabby. How may I assist you?" But all she would hear was static followed by a distant whisper, so faint that she couldn't discern any words. Initially, she dismissed it as a technical glitch. But when the calls persisted, Gabby's curiosity got the better of her. One evening, after another unsettling call, Gabby decided to trace it. She found that the calls were coming from room 237, a room that was supposedly unoccupied. Gathering her courage, she decided to investigate. The corridor leading to room 237 was dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and play tricks on Gabby's eyes. With each step, the carpet muffled her footsteps, and she felt a chilling draft. She hesitated for a moment outside the door before knocking softly. No answer. She tried the knob, and to her surprise, the door creaked open. Inside, the room was cold, much colder than the hallway. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from the moon, which painted a silver glow on the room's interiors. Gabby noticed an old rotary phone on the bedside table, the source of the calls. Suddenly, the phone rang, its ring loud and jarring in the quiet room. Gabby hesitated, then picked up the receiver. This time, the whisper was clearer, though still faint. "Help me, free me." Gabby, her heart pounding, asks, "Who is this? What do you want?" But the line went dead. Determined to uncover the mystery, Gabby decided to research the history of room 237. She discovered a series of newspaper clippings detailing a series of unexplained events in that room over the years, objects moving on their own, unexplained cold spots, and even sightings of apparitions. But what caught her attention the most was a story from the late 70s. A woman named Eliza Harmon had checked into the inn and was assigned to room 237. She was described as being in her early 30s, with raven black hair and striking blue eyes. Eliza had disappeared without a trace 3 days after checking in. Her belongings were still in the room, but there was no sign of any struggle or foul play. She had simply vanished. The more Gabby dug into Eliza's story, the more she felt a connection. She found an old photograph of Eliza and was taken aback by the resemblance they shared. It was uncanny. Over the next few nights, the phone calls became more frequent and more desperate. Gabby would hear Eliza's voice, always repeating the same plea, "Help me, free me." Driven by a mix of fear and determination, Gabby decided to hold a seance. With the help of Clara Bennett, who had gained some notoriety around campus due to her recent supernatural escapades, they attempted to communicate with Eliza. Candles flickered as Gabby and Clara sat opposite each other in room 237. The room was thick with anticipation. Clara began chanting, her voice soft and melodic, creating a trance-like rhythm. Soon, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. The candle's flames wavered as a cold wind swept through, despite the windows being shut. Eliza's presence was felt strongly. In a voice that was both mournful and desperate, Eliza spoke through Clara. "I am trapped. They won't let me leave. The keepers, they bound me here. Gabby," her voice shaking, "asks, how can I help you, Eliza?" "You must break the seal. The pentagram. It's what binds me." Gabby recalled Clara's previous encounter with the keepers and the pentagram conspiracy. She realized that Eliza's spirit was one of the many ensnared by the keepers' dark rituals. The seance ended abruptly as Clara collapsed, drained by the experience. Gabby knew that she had embarked on a perilous path, one that intertwined her fate with that of Eliza. In the days that followed, Gabby and Clara united in their mission to break the pentagram seal and free the spirits bound by it. The mysterious phone calls were just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would pitch them against forces that defied understanding. As Gabby lay in bed that night, the phone beside her rang. Picking it up, she heard Eliza's voice, clearer and more confident than ever before. "Thank you, Gabby. But remember, this is only the beginning." Quote. The line went silent, leaving Gabby in contemplative darkness, pondering the daunting journey ahead. Chapter 6. The search for answers. The air in Athens had become palpably tense. The once peaceful town was now at the heart of whispered rumors, ghostly encounters, and unexplained phenomena. Word of the disturbances spread beyond state lines, attracting the attention of paranormal investigators, psychics, and mediums. Nina Torrance was the most famed among them. Known for her unerring accuracy in past high-profile cases, Nina had a reputation that preceded her. Accompanying her was Alaric Vance, a renowned spiritual medium known to commune with spirits across dimensions. As their caravan rolled into Athens, they were met with a mixed reception. Some locals welcomed the intervention, desperate for explanations and a return to normalcy. Others, more skeptical, viewed their arrival as exploitative, sensationalizing the town's misfortunes. Alaric suggested they begin their assessment at the epicenter of the disturbances, the Ohio University Inn. Given Gabby's experiences and Clara's direct involvement in the recent seance, the duo felt it prudent to hear their testimonies firsthand. Over a pot of steaming tea, Gabby recounted her encounters with Eliza and the ominous phone calls. Clara supplemented with tales of the pentagram conspiracy and the looming presence of the keepers. Nina listened intently, scribbling notes while Alaric, eyes closed, seemed to be feeling the energy of the room. After hearing their stories, Nina leaned back, her face pensive. This is not just about one spirit. Eliza's plea for help is a symptom of a larger, more sinister disturbance. The group decided to hold a seance that evening in room 237 to further delve into the spirit realm. As night descended, the room was bathed in the soft glow of candles, the air thick with incense. Alaric began the ritual, his voice deep and resonant, inviting spirits to communicate. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, the silence broken only by the creaking of the old inn. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through, extinguishing the candles. The room plunged into darkness. Nina's voice broke the silence, urgent and commanding. "Speak to us. Tell us what binds you." A cacophony of whispers filled the room, voices of sorrow, anger, and desperation. Among them, Eliza's voice emerged, "The keepers. They trap us. In the pentagram." Alaric, beads of sweat forming on his brow, pushed further. "How do we break this bind? How do we free you?" A deeper, more malevolent voice answered, "You cannot. The keepers will not be denied." The intensity of the energy was too much for Alaric. He collapsed, the connection severed. The group lit the candles again, the gravity of their task settling upon them. Nina and Alaric spent the next few days meeting locals, collecting stories, and visiting the sites of paranormal activity. From the disappearing Sims Cemetery to the haunted halls of Jefferson Hall, the duo amassed evidence that suggested a network of dark energies converging upon Athens. But as their investigation deepened, so did the malevolence in town. Residents reported increasing violent incidents. Domestic animals were found mutilated. Shadows loomed in alleyways, stalking unsuspecting victims, only to disappear when confronted. It was evident that the spiritual unrest was manifesting in increasingly dangerous ways. Alaric, while meditating in Haining Cemetery, had a chilling vision of hooded figures, the keepers, performing a ritual. He saw them drawing energy from the trapped spirits, strengthening themselves while the souls weakened. Rushing back to the inn, Alaric shared his revelation with Nina. They're not just trapping these spirits for the sake of it. They're feeding on them, siphoning their energy. Nina nodded. That explains the increased violence. The town's energies are being manipulated, creating a vortex of negativity. We need to act fast. The duo, with Gabby and Clara's help, began formulating a plan. They needed to break the pentagram, release the trapped spirits, and somehow combat the formidable keepers. As night fell, Gabby received another call. Expecting Eliza's voice, she was met instead with a deep, mocking laugh. "You think you can stop us?" The voice hissed. "We will," Gabby retorted, trying to mask her fear. "We'll free the spirits you've trapped." The line went silent for a moment before the voice replied, its tone dripping with menace. "The game has just begun." The call ended, leaving Gabby with a heavy sense of foreboding. As they prepared to confront the keepers and the dark forces at play, the group knew the path ahead would test their courage, resilience, and determination. But they were united in their resolve to restore peace to Athens, no matter the cost. Chapter 7 Spirit Room Rituals. The wisp of a crescent moon hung in the sky, casting Athens in an eerie glow. The town's once sleepy streets now felt pregnant with an unsettling energy. It seemed as if the very earth underfoot pulsed with the restless soul's emotions. After a night of rest, research, and recuperation, Nina and Alaric decided to delve into a lesser-known chapter of Athens history, the Coons family and their famed spirit rooms. The Coons family, pioneers of the late 19th century, were notorious for their seances. Their spirit rooms were designed as portals, allowing the living to commune with the dead. Intricately decorated with musical instruments, these rooms witnessed some of the most otherworldly phenomena of their time. Spirits would supposedly play instruments, communicate in audible voices, and even, on rare occasions, manifest. Legend has it, Nina murmured, poring over an old journal she'd found, that the Coons family had unlocked a method of communicating directly with the spirits. Not just any spirits, but ones that had never before spoken to the living. As Gabby and Clara listened, they felt a mix of awe and trepidation. "And you believe that this might be our key?" Clara questioned. Alaric nodded. "If the Coons family could talk to spirits that had never before communicated, we might find someone or something that can guide us against the keepers." But this wasn't going to be a regular seance. Given the heightened spiritual activity and the malevolent energies at play, the ritual would be riskier. They needed a location that held significant spiritual weight. "Perhaps the Moonville Tunnel," Gabby suggested, her voice hesitant. Moonville, a ghost town now, once buzzed with life around the mid-19th century. The Moonville Tunnel's reputation was legendary, haunted by spirits of those who tragically died in the vicinity, especially the apparition of an old brakeman who met his untimely end in a gruesome accident. The group made their preparations and, under the cover of night, made their way to the Moonville Tunnel. Its looming entrance, framed by trees stripped bare by autumn's chill, seemed like a gaping maw ready to swallow them whole. The echoes of long-forgotten train whistles seemed to hang in the air. Inside the tunnel, Alaric and Nina set up in the manner of the Coon's spirit room. Instruments, tambourines, bells, and a small guitar were arranged in a circle. The group sat, hands linked, with Alaric leading the seance. "Great spirits of this place," he began, his voice echoing in the cavernous tunnel, "we seek your guidance. Speak to us. Tell us how to combat the malevolence that plagues our town." The wind howled outside, but inside the tunnel, there was only silence. Minutes dragged on. Just as hope began to wane, a chilling gust swept through the tunnel. The guitar strings plucked themselves, and the tambourines jingled in an otherworldly rhythm. Then, out of the shadows, a figure materialized, an old man in a faded uniform, a lantern in his hand. The ghostly brakeman. "You meddle in matters beyond your grasp," his voice reverberated, heavy with sorrow. "The keepers are older than you know, tied to this land by ancient pacts." Nina, trying to hide her awe and fear, spoke up. "Help us understand. Help us free those trapped." The brakeman's translucent eyes seemed to look far away, to a time long past. Centuries ago, the keepers sought immortality. They struck a bargain with the spirits of this land, life force in exchange for power. They created the pentagram to harness this energy, drawing upon the souls they trapped. Alaric pressed on. "How can we break this cycle? How can we defeat them?" A sadness enveloped the apparition. "The pentagram's power must be disrupted at its heart, Wilson Hall. But be warned, they will not be easily defeated. The key lies in unity. Only when the living and the dead stand together can the keepers be vanquished." As the last word echoed, the instruments fell silent, and the brakeman faded into the darkness, his lantern's light dimming until it was no more. The group left the tunnel, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They had been given a clue, a direction. But the road ahead was fraught with danger. As the first light of dawn painted the horizon, Athens seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Waiting for the showdown between the living and the unseen. Between the seekers of justice and the ancient evil known as the keepers. The battle for the town's very soul had begun. Chapter 8 Riddles from the Beyond. The air inside Nina's makeshift sanctuary, a room in her old family home, was thick with the scent of burning sage and aged books. Dust particles floated lazily, sparkling in the dim light that streamed through the gaps in the heavy curtains. This was where they'd all gathered, awaiting the arrival of two mediums who'd garnered reputations for their unparalleled abilities to communicate with the other side, Madame Lysandra and Brother Benedict. Madame Lysandra, draped in a crimson velvet robe adorned with golden patterns of the moon and stars, was an older woman, her face etched with lifelines that hinted at a lifetime of spiritual encounters. Brother Benedict, dressed in a simple black cassock, carried a worn leather satchel filled with tools of his trade, runes, crystals, and an old, stained grimoire. Sitting around an ornate wooden table, with the medium's hands poised above a spirit board, the room waited in hushed anticipation. "We call upon the spirits," Madame Lysandra began, her voice melodic, "those who wish to help and guide us, to share your knowledge." Brother Benedict closed his eyes, murmuring incantations in a forgotten tongue, while his fingers traced protective symbols over the board. The room grew colder, a palpable chill. A light gust of wind rustled the curtains even though the windows were tightly sealed. The pointer on the spirit board started to move, first tentatively, and then with assertiveness. Lethe. Alaric frowned, noting it down. The river in Hades from which the dead drink to forget their earthly lives, he whispered to Nina. Brother Benedict's eyes snapped open. It's a message, but not complete. We need more. Hours seemed to pass, with every attempt to further communicate being met with either silence or a barrage of seemingly random letters. As frustration began to mount, Madame Lysandra's face contorted with sudden pain. Her voice, no longer her own, rasped out cryptic verses. In the place where memories fade, under the shadow's silent blade, seek where the moon's light seldom strays, and therein the key to your quest lays. Gasping for air, Madame Lysandra slumped back in her chair, momentarily drained. Gabby, always the literary enthusiast, spoke up, it's a riddle. And the first line references Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. It must be hinting at a specific location in the asylum. They deduced that the place where memories fade likely referenced the old patient rooms, specifically the isolation chambers where the most disturbed were often kept. The shadow's silent blade could hint at a place that didn't see light, possibly a basement or underground chamber. Equipped with flashlights, the group ventured to the asylum late at night. The echoes of their footsteps combined with the mournful hoot of an owl gave the dilapidated structure an aura of foreboding. They made their way to the isolation chambers. Shining her flashlight into one corner of a particularly grim-looking chamber, Clara spotted an old mural, faded with time. It depicted a serene forest scene with a river running through it, and at its bank stood a solitary figure, holding what appeared to be a crescent-shaped amulet that glittered even in the mural's worn state. Nina approached the wall, fingers tracing the outline of the amulet. This must be the key. But it's just a painting, Alaric reasoned. With a determined glint in her eyes, Nina pressed on the depicted amulet, and with a grinding sound, a concealed compartment in the floor beside her slid open. Inside lay a tarnished silver amulet, shaped like a crescent moon. This must be what we need to counteract the keepers, Nina whispered, her voice filled with hope and awe. But as she held the amulet up, a cacophony of voices, screams, whispers, cries, filled the room, emanating from the very walls of the asylum. The spirits, long trapped and tormented, were making their presence known. Alaric grasped Nina's hand, ensuring the amulet was securely in their possession. We've got what we came for, but this is far from over. The group hastened their exit, but every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind felt like a spectral touch, and every noise hinted at the restless souls that haunted the place. Outside, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them, they knew the final confrontation with the keepers was approaching. They had a key, but unlocking the solution to the malevolence that plagued their town would demand courage, unity, and the willingness to traverse the boundaries between life and the eerie silence of the beyond. Chapter 9 The Convergence Phenomena. The low hum of machines echoed in the sterile, white-walled laboratory of Dr. Amelia Holloway. As one of the nation's leading parapsychologists, Amelia had seen her fair share of phenomena that most people could scarcely imagine. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the events unfolding in Athens. Large computer monitors displayed scrolling data. Charts, graphs, and diagrams were pinned on the walls. Visual depictions of energy fluctuations, sound frequencies, and thermal readings. The data was clear. There was a staggering increase in poltergeist activity. Tapping her fingers against the cold metal of her workstation, Amelia reviewed her notes. Unusual energy fluctuations, she murmured. Electromagnetic spikes. Anomalous heat signatures. The soundscape analysis showed sharp pitches during the night, frequencies that humans couldn't produce. These were interspersed with what sounded like distorted whispers, human voices from decades, even centuries past, trying to communicate. Drawing her attention to a 3D holographic representation of Athens, she noted 5 distinct energy spikes, all radiating outward from the former asylum. It wasn't random, it was a pattern. The spikes formed a pentagram. Realization struck Amelia. "It's converging," she whispered. A knock at the lab door startled her. Entering was Dr. Lorne Harwick, a physicist known for his unconventional beliefs about the multiverse. "Amelia, I've been looking over your data," Lorne began, glancing at the overwhelming charts. "What we're seeing here isn't just an increase in spectral activity. It's a merging, a convergence." "Convergence of what, exactly?" Amelia asked, though she felt she already knew the answer. "The living realm and the afterlife. Athens is turning into a portal, a gateway." The thought was both fascinating and terrifying. But science had always been Amelia's grounding force. How? She asks. And more importantly, why now? Lorne moved to the holographic representation. The pentagram. It's not just symbolic. It's a geometric formation that's channeling the energy, amplifying it. "These points," he said, indicating the 5 tips of the pentagram, they're conduits. But the asylum, where it all centers, that's the nucleus. Something or someone has triggered this. We have to find out what. Amelia reflected on the artifact Nina and her group had found. The amulet. It could be amplifying or directing the energies. The two delved into historical records, seeking anything that could give them answers. Hours turned into days. What they found was staggering. Centuries ago, Athens was the site of ancient pagan rituals. The land was considered sacred, a meeting point between the physical and spiritual. Over time, as settlers arrived and modernized the area, these truths were forgotten or deliberately buried. But energies, especially ones as potent as this, could not be erased. The asylum's construction on such a site had disturbed these dormant energies. Recent events, perhaps the unearthing of the amulet, acted as a catalyst. Convergences like these have been mentioned in ancient texts, Lorne explained. Legends spoke of realms merging, where the living could see the dead and vice versa. But it was also warned that if the balance tipped, if the dead started pouring into the living world, it would be catastrophic. Amelia clenched her fist, her resolve strengthening. Then we need to find a way to close the portal, restore the balance. At that very moment, the lab's machines beeped frantically. The computer screen showed a real-time feed from a camera set up at the asylum. Shadows moved erratically, taking humanoid shapes, spectral figures, more corporeal than before, walking the grounds. They're getting stronger. More present, Lorne whispered, horror evident in his eyes. And if we don't act soon, they won't just be shadows. They'll be here, with us, Amelia added grimly. With Athens as ground zero, they understood that the ramifications could ripple out, affecting the world. They needed to rally everyone, use every piece of knowledge, every tool at their disposal to prevent an apocalypse of phantasmal proportions. The line between the living and the dead was blurring. The convergence had begun. And Athens, with its dark history, twisted alleys, and haunted legacy, was now the battleground for the very soul of existence. Chapter 10, Unearthing the Truth. Nina's footsteps echoed through the cavernous, now museum-adorned hallways of the former asylum. Guided only by a narrow beam from her flashlight and the haunting memories of her recent experiences, she descended into the older parts of the building, those kept from the public eye. The air grew colder, more oppressive. She had reached the archives. A massive room opened before her. Rows upon rows of shelving, each piled with dusty boxes and weathered files, beckoned her in. The smell of age, of secrets, of despair was pervasive. Nina felt as though the room was breathing, holding its breath, waiting for her to discover its concealed truths. She began sorting through files, patient reports, doctor's notes, architectural plans. It was the personal journals, however, that drew her deepest attention. Scribbled handwriting, the urgency of the words often pressed hard onto the paper, unveiled horrors that defied comprehension. One entry stood out, January 17, 1956. Margaret won't stop screaming. She claims she sees the souls of the past. They speak to her, beckon her. She's been found multiple times in the old burial grounds. Seeking the key, she says. We have had to restrain her for her safety. Nina's heart raced. The name Margaret Shilling had surfaced again in the midst of the convergence, suggesting that her restless spirit played a pivotal role. But why? And what was this key she sought? Digging deeper, Nina stumbled upon a rough map of the asylum grounds. A section marked "Restricted" caught her eye. In faint ink, almost as if someone attempted to erase it, was an annotation, "Old Burial Grounds." Armed with this newfound information, Nina decided to venture out. She needed to find this burial ground and uncover what connection it had with Margaret Shilling's restless spirit. As she trekked across the expansive grounds, moonlight filtered through the trees, casting ghostly shadows on her path. Ahead, the terrain dipped, revealing an old, dilapidated wrought iron gate. Beyond lay the old burial grounds. Overgrown and uncared for, the place held an eerie silence, pierced only by distant whispers of the wind, or perhaps disembodied voices from the past. There were tombstones, but many had decayed beyond recognition. However, to Nina's shock, there were dozens of unmarked graves, simple mounds in the earth, forgotten by time. A sense of grief washed over her. These were likely patients, their stories untold, their deaths unnoticed. Near the heart of the burial grounds stood an imposing statue of an angel, its features eroded but its form still commanding attention. At its base, another grave, but this one was different. Fresh flowers, their petals still vibrant, lay upon it. And the name on the weathered stone read, Margaret Shilling. Drawn inexplicably, Nina knelt by the grave. Her fingers brushed the cold earth, and as they did, a rush of visions consumed her. Margaret, eyes wild with fear, being dragged by attendants, her cries echoing down the hallways. Secret rooms where unspeakable treatments were conducted. The old burial grounds, where Margaret would run to, whispering to the spirits. A necklace, a key, in her hands. And then, a voice. Find the key. It's the way to set us free. Shaken, Nina pulled back. The message was clear. Margaret's spirit was tethered, not just by her tragic end but by something tangible. The key. The convergence, the events at the museum, the haunting phone calls, all of it pointed back to this nexus of pain and suffering. And Margaret Shilling, with her unique sensitivity to the spiritual world, was central. Nina knew what she had to do. She had to find the key. Whatever it opened, or whatever power it held, it was the linchpin. The mystery of Athens, the tales of hauntings, and the specters threatening to breach the world of the living, all intertwined with the story of a tormented soul seeking release. But time was running out. The boundaries between realms were thinning with each passing moment. The weight of the task ahead pressed down on Nina, but she was resolute. Returning to the asylum-turned-museum, she prepared herself for the next stage of her journey. For now, she had a clearer purpose, an understanding of the heart of the enigma. The spirits of Athens, particularly Margaret Shilling, were crying out for resolution. The search for the key had begun. The fate of Athens, and perhaps the world, hinged on its discovery and the secrets it would unveil. Chapter 11. The Forgotten Stories. The pale glow of dawn hinted at the horizon, painting the walls of the asylum in muted pastels. Inside, the air was thick with suspense, each corridor teeming with stories yearning to break free. With the map she had uncovered, Nina ventured deeper into the abandoned wing, untouched since the asylum's closure. Each room was an exhibit of neglect. Old beds rusted and collapsed, walls stained with time, the soft cries of memories echoing faintly. But what caught Nina's eye most was a tattered journal nestled on a forgotten bedside table. Opening the leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle, Nina began to read the handwritten tales of various patients. Their stories, though varied, carried a common thread: pain, misunderstanding, and a yearning for freedom. The words danced in front of her, each tale more heart-wrenching than the last. One account, however, stood apart. It bore no name, but as she read, Nina felt a chilling familiarity. It was the harrowing tale of a young woman, Margaret Shilling. June 14, 1953. Another day in this prison. They say I'm mad. But it's not madness that plagues me. It's the voices of the past, the souls trapped here. They speak to me, show me things. A hidden world only I can see. August 5, 1954. Dr. Whitmore believes he can cure me. His methods are brutal. Cold baths. Restraints. The electroshock. Each treatment rips me apart. But I hold on. For if I fade, who will listen to them? Who will tell their stories? December 12, 1955. I found it. A key. It's beautiful, ornate. They think it's just a trinket I carry for comfort. But it's more. The spirits, they whisper its importance. But its purpose? That remains a mystery. January 16, 1956. Tomorrow, they plan something new for me. An experimental treatment. I'm scared. The spirits are restless, agitated. They scream warnings. I've hidden the key. If I don't survive, someone, someday, must find it. The next entry was not in Margaret's handwriting but scribbled hastily, likely by an attendant, January 17, 1956. Patient found lifeless in her cell. Cause unknown. All personal effects to be catalogued and stored. Strange artifact, a key, found under the floorboards. Moved to storage in the West Wing. A deep chill ran down Nina's spine. The link was unmistakable. Margaret had died, leaving behind a mystery intertwined with the very fabric of the asylum and the spirits trapped within. The last piece of the puzzle was that key. Driven by a newfound urgency, Nina made her way to the West Wing. Navigating through rooms filled with relics of a bygone era, she finally stumbled upon an old storage area. Amidst the cobwebs and dusty crates, a wooden box sat on a table, inscribed with one word: Shilling. Inside, nestled in velvet, was the key. Ornate, with intricate carvings and symbols, it shimmered mysteriously in the dim light. Holding it, a flood of emotions washed over Nina, the pain, the hope, the despair. The weight of countless untold stories pressed upon her. The ghosts of the asylum seemed to converge around her, their whispers growing louder, a cacophony of voices seeking release. At the epicenter was Margaret, her spirit translucent yet commanding, eyes filled with sadness. The connection between Nina and Margaret deepened, and memories, not Nina's own but Margaret's, flashed before her eyes. A childhood filled with innocence, the sudden ability to see spirits, her commitment to the asylum, the brutal treatments, the discovery of the key, and her eventual tragic demise. As the visions faded, Nina, drenched in sweat, found herself back in the storage room, the spectral audience gone. The silence was deafening, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of anticipation. Nina clutched the key. Whatever power it held, whatever secrets it concealed, she was now the guardian of these tales, the forgotten stories of the Athens Lunatic Asylum. Margaret Shilling's story was just the beginning. The threads of countless lives intertwined, and their resolution rested upon uncovering the purpose of this mysterious artifact. But time was of the essence. As the first rays of morning light streamed through the windows, the line between the past and present, the living and the dead, blurred further. With the key in hand, the next chapter awaited, filled with hope, danger, and the quest for redemption. Chapter 12. Resonance of the past. Outside, the town of Athens slept under a moonless night, oblivious to the energies surging beneath its streets. The asylum, a silent sentinel, stood with walls that held memories of the past like water in a dam. And it was beginning to overflow. In the heart of the asylum, Nina, with the ornate key clutched in her hand, sensed the spirits swarming around her. They were no longer hazy figures of the peripheral. They were real, vivid, almost solid. Their stories, once muffled whispers, were now a symphony of voices crying out for justice. Each ghostly figure represented an unresolved tale. A woman in a tattered dress who murmured about stolen babies, a man with shackled hands lamenting betrayal, and countless others. But the most dominant was Margaret, her ethereal form clearer now, her voice more resonant. "Do you understand now, Nina?" Margaret's voice echoed. "We are not malevolent by nature. We're trapped, forced to relive our pain, our betrayal, over and over. The building might have changed, but the energy remains." As if on cue, images flooded Nina's mind, a montage of the asylum's history. She saw patients brought in against their will, subjected to torturous treatments, their cries and pleas ignored. She witnessed secrets buried deep, records altered, graves unmarked. The asylum wasn't just a place of healing. It was a cauldron of despair and hidden atrocities. They built atop our memories, layering paint over pain, transforming the asylum into galleries and halls, Margaret continued. But we remained, echoes of the past, wanting our stories told. It all clicked for Nina. The transformation of the asylum, the vanishings, the spectral activities, they were manifestations of the pent-up energies from the past. The ghosts didn't just want acknowledgement, they wanted redemption. "What can I do?" Nina whispered, tears in her eyes. Margaret pointed to the key. "This is not just a key, it's a conduit. Through it, you can channel our energies, give us a voice." Nina hesitated. Taking on such a task was perilous. But the weight of responsibility, the sheer urgency of the situation, compelled her forward. She nodded, holding the key aloft. "Tell me how." Margaret instructed her to find the oldest room in the asylum, the one place where the energies were the most concentrated. There, a ritual had to be performed, one that would resonate with the memories etched into the walls. Following Margaret's lead, Nina entered a dilapidated chamber, its walls covered in chipped paint and mold, revealing layers of its history. In the center lay a broken chair, an old restraint system, eerily reminiscent of an electric chair. "Place the key on the chair," Margaret directed. Nina did as told, and the room's temperature dropped drastically. The very fabric of reality seemed to waver, and soon, more spirits began to materialize. Margaret began to chant in a language long forgotten, her voice rising and falling in cadence. The other spirits joined in, their voices melding into a haunting melody. As the chorus swelled, the key started to glow, absorbing the energies around. Nina felt herself lifted off the ground, levitating as the force pulled her in. The room was no longer visible, replaced by rapid flashes of the past. Scenes of heartbreak, betrayal, and torture unfolded, each more terrifying than the last. Hours, or maybe minutes, it was hard to tell, passed before everything started to fade. The intense energy, the haunting chorus, the vivid images, all ebbed away. The last thing Nina heard was Margaret's voice, soft and comforting. "You have given us a voice. Our stories will resonate. Thank you." When Nina opened her eyes, she was back in the room, the sun peeking through the shattered windows. The key, once radiant, now lay dull and lifeless on the floor. But the heavy, oppressive atmosphere was gone. In its place was an overwhelming sense of calm. With trembling hands, Nina picked up the key, a symbol of the bridge between the past and present, the living and dead. The spirits had found their voice, but their stories were far from over. With the resonance of the past echoing in her ears, Nina knew her journey was just beginning. She had to share these tales, ensuring that the haunting legacy of the Athens Lunatic Asylum would never be forgotten. Chapter 13, Ritual of Closure. The wind had a restless energy to it, clawing at the aged windows of the town hall. Inside, a motley crew of townsfolk gathered, their faces bearing a mix of determination, hope, and anxiety. Nina, holding the now dulled key in her hand, stood at the center. By her side was Mayor Caldwell, a typically boisterous man rendered contemplative by the events unfolding. "Good evening, everyone," Nina began, her voice clear. "I understand the trepidation many of you feel. I've experienced it firsthand. However, with your help, we can end this haunting and bring peace to Athens." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Nina detailed her harrowing experience in the asylum, the energies she had encountered, and the messages conveyed. As she spoke of the spirits, the air grew colder, lights flickering occasionally, signaling their presence. "Our aim," she continued, "is not to banish these spirits but to honor their memory, acknowledge their pain, and give them the peace they've been denied." Mayor Caldwell then stepped forward. "We're Athens, and we stand united. Together, we can overcome this. I propose a collective ritual, a ceremony of closure to appease these souls." The plan was discussed at length. It was agreed that the ritual would be held in the courtyard of the asylum, where energies were strongest. Every household was to bring an item symbolizing peace, a white candle, a feather, or even a simple handwritten note of goodwill. As the townsfolk prepared, word quickly spread. Residents who had left Athens due to the hauntings began to return, understanding the gravity of the situation and the role they could play. The town was, in essence, coming back to life. On the night of the ritual, the atmosphere was electric. A massive circle was drawn in the courtyard, with the key placed at the center. People began placing their items of peace, creating a mosaic of hope. Nina, leading the ritual, requested everyone to hold hands. Focus your energy, your wishes, your memories on the key. It is our conduit. It will channel our collective strength. The circle glowed in the dark, faint silhouettes of the spirits hovering around. As the townspeople closed their eyes and chanted words of solace and forgiveness, a mesmerizing light began emanating from the key, its radiance pulsating, connecting the world of the living and the dead. It was then that Margaret Shilling appeared, clearer than ever. Alongside her, the apparitions of countless other patients manifested. The chants grew louder, resonating with the cries of the spirits, creating a symphony of unity. Margaret moved towards Nina, a tear streaming down her ethereal face. "Thank you," she whispered. And with a final surge of energy, a blinding light enveloped the courtyard. When it dimmed, the spirits had vanished. The key, once at the heart of the circle, had disintegrated, leaving behind a fine silver dust that was soon carried away by the wind. The portal was closed. The restless souls had found their peace. Exhausted but elated, the townspeople rejoiced. They had faced the haunting past of Athens and had emerged stronger. The ritual of closure wasn't just about the spirits. It was a healing balm for the living, reminding them of the power of unity, acknowledgement, and redemption. The following days saw Athens transform. The tales of the spirits, once whispered in fear, were now narrated with respect. The asylum-turned-museum became a symbol of the town's resilience, with a special section dedicated to the spirits, ensuring their stories would never be forgotten. Nina, once an outsider, was hailed a hero. But she knew her journey had just begun. The experience with the spirits had opened her eyes to the world beyond, and she realized there were many more stories waiting to be told. For Athens, the resonance of the past had culminated in a harmonious present. But the echoes of those events would reverberate for years to come, reminding everyone of the thin line between our world and the one beyond. Chapter 14. The final night, the moon hung in the sky like a shard of splintered bone, casting ghastly shadows over Athens. The asylum hill, a looming black silhouette, awaited the townspeople. Nina, clutching a vial containing remnants of the disintegrated key, led the procession up the hill. They carried no candles, no lanterns, for the pathway was eerily lit by a serpentine trail of phosphorescent will-o'-the-wisps. Every step the townspeople took resonated with the whispers of the past. The wind carried tales of anguish, betrayal, and forgotten memories. As they neared the top, these voices grew stronger, almost deafening, a cacophony of the trapped souls seeking release. The courtyard, once a symbol of peace from the earlier ritual, now appeared transformed. In its center stood a colossal portal, swirling in hues of darkest obsidian and blood red, reminiscent of a vengeful eye. Around it, spirits flitted restlessly, their ethereal forms leaving a cold, tingling trail wherever they passed. Mayor Caldwell, a robust pillar of the community, hesitated for a moment, staring at the scene. "This is not what I imagined," he whispered, but determination soon replaced fear. "We must proceed." Nina nodded and began laying out the ritualistic circle. In its center, she placed the vial, and around it, the townspeople arranged themselves, hands intertwined, forming a human chain of courage and hope. The chanting began, their voices united, reaching out to the spirits that roamed the courtyard. But as they sang, a massive force thrust against them, powerful spirits of the asylum, tormented and betrayed in life, refusing to bow down in death. From the depths of the portal, a specter, more menacing than the others, emerged. Its form was distorted, an amalgamation of many souls, their anger and suffering bound together in a single entity. It lunged at the circle, breaking the chain of hands, throwing the ritual into chaos. But in that dire moment, another spirit intervened. Margaret Shilling, ethereal and radiant, her presence contrasting the darkness around. "Stop," she commanded the malevolent specter. "Your anger is understood, but it won't bring peace. Join us, let us find closure." The dark spirit hesitated, its form fluctuating between anger and despair. But Margaret's calming aura began to envelop it, and slowly its fury subsided. The townspeople, seeing an opportunity, quickly reformed their circle, their chants growing stronger. Margaret, her hands extended towards the portal, began a haunting lullaby, one she had often hummed within the cold walls of the asylum. The portal responded, its colors shifting, pulsating in rhythm with her song. The spirits, drawn to her melody, started merging with the portal, their energies fueling its closure. But as the end neared, a tremendous force resisted, the very core of the portal, a culmination of all the negativity and malevolence, unwilling to be sealed. It surged forward, threatening to consume everything in its path. Margaret, seeing the impending danger, moved to the forefront. "Remember my story," she pleaded with the townspeople. "Remember all our stories. Give us the strength to close this once and for all." The townsfolk, tears streaming down their faces, channeled their collective energy, their memories, their love, towards Margaret. With a final, soulful note, she thrust her essence into the portal, the overwhelming light from her spirit forcing the darkness back. And then, with an ear-shattering sound, like the breaking of a massive glass, the portal shattered, its remnants disappearing into the wind. Exhausted and drained, the townspeople collapsed, the weight of the night bearing down on them. But as dawn's first light broke, they realized the hill's oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The spirits had found their peace. Margaret's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The asylum, once a place of torment, became a beacon of hope and unity for Athens. The tales of this night, of Margaret's bravery and the town's unity, were passed down through generations. The final night atop the asylum hill was not just the end of a haunting. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of a community that refused to be broken. And while the physical structure of the asylum would eventually give way to time, the stories, the memories, and the lessons would forever resonate in the hearts of Athens residents. Chapter 15. A new dawn. Athens awoke to a morning unlike any other. The oppressive gloom that had shrouded the town for months had dissipated, replaced by a light so ethereal, it felt like the town was cradled in the hands of an angel. As the first rays of the sun kissed the ground, the townspeople gathered at the base of the asylum hill. It was an unspoken agreement, a silent understanding that after the harrowing events of the previous night, they needed to stand united, breathing in the new dawn. Marjorie, a widow who had lived her entire life in Athens and had witnessed its tormented history, was the first to speak. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It's over. It's finally over." Mayor Caldwell, standing by her side, nodded solemnly. He addressed the crowd, his voice carrying a weight of gratitude and relief. "We have endured, confronted our history, and emerged stronger. Today marks not just the end of a haunting but the beginning of a new era for Athens." The sentiment was shared by all. The town that had been torn apart by fear and distrust was healing. Families that had been estranged came together in embraces. Neighbors who had turned against each other in suspicion shook hands. The tapestry of the community, which had frayed at the edges, was now being mended. In the days that followed, the townsfolk initiated a collective healing process. Counselors and therapists from neighboring towns were invited to help those traumatized. Group sessions were organized, where people shared their experiences, cried, laughed, and slowly started rebuilding their emotional walls. At the heart of this transformation was Nina. The same woman, who had once been looked upon with skepticism, now emerged as a beacon of hope. She organized workshops where the town's history was revisited, not with fear, but with respect and understanding. The asylum, the epicenter of all the hauntings, was given special attention. No longer a place of dread, it was transformed into a memorial. The unmarked graves discovered during the course of the haunting were identified, and proper headstones were erected. Each stone told a story of a soul that had once walked the earth, a soul that now rested in peace. But the most touching tribute was reserved for Margaret Shilling. A statue in her likeness was erected at the very spot where she had made the ultimate sacrifice. Inscribed at its base were the words, "In memory of Margaret Shilling and all the lost souls of Athens." May their stories be a beacon of light for generations to come. The renewed respect for history had a ripple effect. The town's younger generation, which had previously shown indifference to the tales of old, now listened with rapt attention. Schools included the hauntings history in their curriculum, ensuring that the lessons learned would never be forgotten. As months turned to years, the events of that fateful night became the stuff of legends. Tourists from all over the country came to Athens, not in search of ghosts, but to experience a town that had faced its past head-on and had emerged victorious. But for the residents of Athens, the haunting was not just a tale to be told. It was a lived experience, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of community. The spirits had sought acknowledgement, and in giving them that, the town had discovered its own soul. The new dawn wasn't just a break from the darkness. It was a promise that as long as the people of Athens remembered their history and stood united, no force, supernatural or otherwise, could ever break them again. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.